happens if we start? I'm Mary Kehoe. I have the pleasure of chairing the Development Review Board, and this is our meeting for August 7, 2016, which I'm calling to order. First, I want to make sure that everybody who's in attendance has had the opportunity to sign in, and I would invite anybody at this time to make public comment if there's any to be made. Anybody from the board? Based on the silence, I assume everybody's blissfully happy, so we'll move on to approval of the minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting, which was about a century ago on July 20th? Second to the motion, please?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Does anyone have any comments before we vote to approve the minutes? Hearing none, I'll take a vote. All in favor of approving the minutes? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. So now we go to the application of the design review application, DR 16-08 from Kim Glynn, Shelburnewood Mobile Home Co-op. It's for site 157. It's located at 82 Shelburnewood Drive. It's a new tiny house, Casa 802. Is there anybody here on behalf of this design review application? Okay, who's the applicant? Can you step forward and raise your right hand and be sworn in, and then I'll ask you your name. Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Can I have your name, please? I'm going to ask you to keep your voice up. So even though you've got a microphone, that microphone's for the benefit of our viewing audience at home, and I don't think it's amplified, so if you could keep your voice up so everybody can hear you, although I feel like I'm
It's
really
getting
amplified.
something, yeah.
Oh, it's amplified tonight because we have the later hearing, so anyway,
So
but
it's
nevertheless.
Kim Marie Glenn.
Okay. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your application?
Yeah, so the application is just to be placing a tiny house which is already built and is going to be transported onto lot 157 at 82 Shelburnewood Drive, which is the Shelburnewood Co-op. It's going to go between two houses. There's a picture of the layout and how it sits on the site. It is built to be solar, so it's kind of set up to eventually be solar. It's going to be transported in with a truck, and a crane's going to come and drop it, so it still fits the mobile home
Pad?
It's going to have a foundation. We're still discussing what the foundation's going to be, but it's going to be within the HUD requirements. And it's most likely going to be piers, but we're also talking about a possible crawl space that would be under, still fitting in the mobile home definition.
Any questions from the board? Kate, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't. Everything looks good.
Anyone? I have a couple of questions. You said it's going to possibly be heated with solar. Is there some other form of heat you're considering, or not yet?
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole thing was designed, it's supposed to be designed with solar in mind, and it's actually not set up for solar right now, but the whole thing's electric. So that's the ideal, is to get, when I say the placement on the site, like hopefully it's going to be placed so it does use some of the natural light to work with the design. And then also, I hope down the line when I get money to actually have the whole thing run on solar, so it's net zero. That's the whole.
Is there a mobile home pad there on that space now, or no?
No, it's actually an empty lot.
Okay.
There was plans to do parking. So there is some rocks and there's a driveway, but there's nothing else right now.
And if this is going to be sitting on a foundation, unlike some mobile tiny homes that I know can be moved, will this be permanent?
It can be moved again, so I hear, but it's a costly move because it's a crane and it's getting it onto another truck, which costs money to move it. So, yeah, I'm looking at it as not moving it around, but if for some reason,
And will you be a member of the co-op?
I'll be a member of the co-op.
And have you gotten insurance on it?
I did.
Okay.
Yep, I just got it the other day.
All right,
Yeah.
great. That's all the questions I have. Anybody else? Okay, well, if that's the case, I'm going to move to grant design review approval to Kim Glynn for the Casa 802 tiny house on site 157 at 82 Shelburnewood Drive. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yeah. Any opposed? Motion is approved. Thank you. It's very,
Wahoo!
very cute. Things are moving along a lot faster than I thought. Okay, next on our agenda is application. It's the first, I'll point out, with the acronym FBZ that we've ever had. 16-01, application by Civil Engineering Associates on behalf of Susan Baldwin for sketch plan approval. The project is an existing 2-acre lot, and it's proposed to be comprised of retaining an existing home and turning it into a duplex, and then creating 6 single-family home lots and 1 additional duplex lot for a total of 9 new units on a total of 9 lots, one of which will be open space.
Hey, Mary, did we skip over 5?
Oh, my apologies. Thank you. I apologize for that. Thank you for pointing it out. I'm sorry, I skipped application SUB 16-03. Sorry, Dave. This is the application of Linka Lee, Sawyer Lee Living Trust, and the Ewing Farm Trust for a final plan approval of a 2-lot subdivision. This is the one that's got a lot that sits partly in South Burlington and partly in Shelburne. Is there anybody here on application SUB 16-03?
That's me,
All right, good evening. Could you state your name for the record?
Jennifer Desatel.
And Jennifer, I'll swear you in again. Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth in connection with your application?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Do you want to bring us up to speed? I know you were here, what, about a month ago or 2?
Yeah, I think it was a couple months ago now. We are back with a very similar, in fact, the exact same plan that we submitted last time because there weren't really any changes, but we're required to come to 2 hearings for this application. We are still just trying to add a little bit of land to her Shelburne lot so that she can create a separate Shelburne lot and a separate South Burlington lot so it no longer straddles the boundary.
Okay. Thank you. Kate, anything to add?
Just that Jen did get information from South Burlington regarding the application, and they don't have any problems with it. You should have a piece of paper that has the email on it, and they just want a copy of the final approval for their records. So that was one of the conditions we put, recommendations we put in the sketch plan. It wasn't really a question, but just something I wanted to point out, that you have to feel comfortable with or approve the access to the lot. And currently the access will be from an existing easement, well, 2 existing easements, one that goes from Cheese Factory Road and follows down Cheese Factory Lane, which is a private road owned by South Burlington. And then the next one is just a 60-foot easement that's a benefit to multiple parties, but including them. So as long as you're comfortable with that, I don't really see any issues with the application.
Anybody else have any questions? Mark? No?
I think actually, just for the record, I think Cheese Factory Lane's isn't that a public road? Because I know Shelburne plows it. I think they maintain it, but I don't think it's an issue.
I haven't had to look into that
Yeah,
myself.
I don't think it's a
It may
moot
well be.
point, but I think it's just, pretty sure it's a town road.
Okay, well, if there are no questions, then I would move to finalize the record and for the final plat application for SUB 16-03 and to close the hearing. And I'm just going to combine it all into one thing. Move to close the hearing and direct staff to prepare a decision indicating approval of the application as depicted on the plat prepared by Trudell Consulting Engineers, titled Sawyer W. Lee Living Trust like.
Oh, sorry, that was a typo.
Well, anyway, just
What is
approving what's
titled?
prepared by Trudell Consulting Engineers for the application. And note that the Mylar needs to be recorded within 180 days. Can I have a second to that conflated motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. So it's been approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, now we get to do the one that I want to do so badly because it's our first form-based zoning application. Sorry about that. So this is the application by Civil Engineering Associates on behalf of Susan Baldwin for sketch plan approval. It's for the total of 9 new lots, one of which will be open space. Do we have that right, Kate? How can we have 9 new lots and
9 in total, so there's an existing lot, a proposed duplex, 6 proposed single families.
Got it,
and
got it.
open space.
Yep, and the property is located at 93 Webster Road within the residential district and storm water overlay district. And the applicant has opted into our optional form-based overlay district zoning, and it's going to be reviewed under the requirements of Article 18A. Is there anybody here on behalf of the applicant?
I am. I'm Dave Marshall from Civil Engineering Associates.
Okay, Dave, can you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you want to tell us about the application?
Very good. We want to thank the chair for allowing us to be on the agenda tonight. We understand you have other items of great interest later on, so we will take as much time or a little time as you like in introducing this particular project, with the idea that ultimately the typical practice we understand is to have a site visit. So if we could, at least out of tonight's meeting, be able to schedule that, that would be great, and we can continue the
Sure.
sketch plan hearing thereafter. So to orient you in regards to this particular application, the cover sheet for the plan is oriented north, and this is the intersection of, well, the bend, the elbow, and Webster Road. This is Route 7, heading up to the, just shy of the light. The jug handle is just a little bit further to the north. And this particular property, the church property, the large open space that primarily occupies that elbow intersection of Webster Road, is situated to the south of Ms. Baldwin's property. This is a little bit greater than 2 acres in size. And in this particular case, what's depicted on this particular plan is the conceptual future road. If all properties in the future were to adopt the form-based zoning approach, as part of the master planning of this particular neighborhood area, a conceptual roadway had been identified within the form-based zoning mapping. That being the background, the applicant is proposing to take advantage of form-based zoning, and in form-based zoning, this is going to be new for everybody here in Shelburne, but nonetheless, what it tries to do is create fabric of the neighborhoods and some cohesive building designs that basically speak to the street, and also augments the other components of vehicular, pedestrian, bicycle circulation. So in this particular case, to orient you here, this particular property heads back, and ultimately with the proposed subdivision, what it does is adopts the street standard that is located generally in the alignment of the original roadway shown on the form-based zoning. Now, the reason you see zigs and zags on this particular plan is because when the planners drew this particular line at 1 inch is equal to 1,000 feet, they didn't have the benefit of understanding all the existing site conditions that are located along this particular corridor. So what this particular zig and zag does is basically represent or respect some of the wetlands that are on the eastern portion of the property. and at the same time also adopt some of the discussions with the church as far as not plowing right through one of their buildings, but actually to go around it. So that being the background, this particular alignment, what it does is shows how ultimately the roadway could be continued on either side of the Baldwin property. And at the same time, within the Baldwin property, it basically is proposed to be constructed consistent with the typical street standard called for in the form-based zoning. That being the background, one of the challenges of being the first one on the starting line is that it's going to look funny initially. And in order to be able to get to the street, you know, we have a temporary access that basically comes from Webster Road and heads easterly and ties into the typical street section. So that being the background, things that we want to be thinking about is A, what is a practical, typical section for a quote-unquote temporary road as far as accessing this particular area. We still want to make sure it's functional, but at the same time, we don't want to overbuild with the understanding that that is not ultimately the concept. The concept is a north-south roadway, and that this east-west one probably we would be looking for something similar or perhaps a little bit wider than some of the existing driveways, common driveways or combined driveways that service some of the neighborhood properties immediately to the north. So that being the background, again, we thought the site visit would be helpful for everybody to understand a little bit more of the character of the neighborhood as far as what are the existing features, what the character of the property is, and out of all that, we can then have a more educated discussion on ultimately the characteristics of this particular proposal. The form-based zoning is intended to be fairly detailed as far as the expectations of the applicant. Doesn't leave a lot of leeway, but there are a couple of waivers that will be discussed perhaps at the next meeting that would enable this particular project to achieve the goals of temporary connectivity in a manner that perhaps wasn't originally envisioned in the form-based zoning as far as all of the typical street sections that were embedded into those regulations. So that being the background, I guess now might be a good time to introduce or to take any questions that you have in the biggest of pictures. And out of all that, we'll follow the chair's lead on how they'd like us to proceed.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Marshall? I know I do, but
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just had a question. The neighborhood street, is that wide because it has on-street parking?
That is correct.
Okay.
So this is going to be a street section. It's going to be hard for everybody to get used to. The designation, when you look on the very upper portion of the shaded area, it talks about NR, that's a neighborhood residential designation. The next number 50 is going to be associated with the rights-of-way width, and then 34 is the actual pavement width. So 34 is a big number. That's something that we're not very used to here in Shelburne, but Jeff brings up the exact point where it's intended to basically have parking on both sides of the road. So that is going to be something that, again, we have to be thinking about. One of the things about form-based zoning is that it makes the lot smaller, smaller than what we're used to. And one of the byproducts of that is not trying to put all of your parking needs, whether you have a party or otherwise, on your own property. That this is where the street basically picks up those particular requirements for those interim parking needs. And out of all that also creates the friction for slowing people down. So I don't think we're too worried about short-term speed on this particular roadway. But nonetheless, in the long term, that's what the intent of this particular pavement width is, to provide parking on both sides, and hence also that's going to be a necessary byproduct of ultimately managing some of the speed here. Now, with this particular alignment concept, that's a secondary benefit that in regards to at least traffic calming, that will provide some means of slowing people down. Again, us all trying to get used to the 34-foot wide pavement width.
And will this first phase road configuration pass muster with fire access? Is that?
I think in this particular case, one of the benefits of the 34-foot width is that as you move, basically we have a 20-foot wide width, which is from the NFPA 1 document is the bare minimum for access to and from. But as far as the turning width on the other side, that is fairly good. But I think, Jeff, you bring up a good point that when we sit down with the fire chief in more particular nature, we'll take a look at exactly not only getting in, but more importantly, getting back out. So you may see the radius adjacent to Lot 3 perhaps change a bit.
Anything else?
So connected to that, sorry. Mary.
No, go ahead. I'm
Connected to that.
inviting comment.
So, if and when, this form-based zoning proposed street is completed, would that secondary access go away?
That would be the intent.
Okay.
So one of the things that we will also be thinking about is as infill occurs, whether it be 1 year, 10 year, or 40 years from now, that as those particular components get put into place, we would look for a condition that would allow the applicant to come back and start to perhaps remove appropriate portions. So right now, when we're talking about getting from Webster Road down into the future roadway, we have two components, both for vehicular as well as pedestrian. There may be a point in time where it's important, where it makes sense, depending on the development pattern, where one or both goes away. But in this particular case, yes, that is an intent that eventually this shaded area will be converted back into green space.
And I guess just one more, and this is probably less a question than a comment, and probably one that wouldn't really, be relevant until down the road. I'm just looking at where that road, that proposed road, exits onto Webster. I mean, my comment is just, there's just a lot going on there. I mean, between, a walking path and a bike path, that's where, right after the existing intersection crosses over the road, and then traffic coming around that corner and then coming in from Route 7. I mean, would just hope
Fair
that
enough.
the proper studies and everything.
So, I mean, things that we would hope
Yeah.
eventually would get tweaked is that the future roadway at least would come into the intersection
Yeah.
across the way, so that from an alignment standpoint
Right.
and a true four-way
Yep.
intersection, that would be controlled. Now, whether there's ever some point in the future where that becomes stopped, who knows, stop control.
Yeah.
But in regards to at least that particular configuration and all the other things that are going on, points well taken.
Any other questions from the board? I have a couple questions, Dave. First of all, the open lot is the one that's sort of landlocked in the back.
That is correct.
And what's is there some sort of, is that just wetland right there?
It's primary wetland, and there is some upland area on the far east end of that particular lot. So we're still trying to figure out, based on what is already out there for tree cover, whether it makes sense to try to have that as a garden area or anything of that particular nature. So we're still fleshing that out as far as what the opportunities in that back area are.
And I imagine you're not planning a sidewalk on this temporary 20-foot wide.
It would be more an at-grade, improved surface,
Okay.
yes.
But you would be, if approved, installing sidewalks on your little strip of road.
That is, yes, that is the intent, is to basically to comply with the typical section.
And the part of Webster Road that runs north-south does not have sidewalks, is that right? Do you
That is
know?
correct.
Yep.
Pretty wide shoulder.
Okay.
Yeah. Good point, yes.
Okay. So does anyone in the audience first of all, I saw some people come in. I want to make sure if you came in after we started the meeting that you sign in. If you haven't, please do so. And if you do have, it should be testimony that you're giving under our new rules that were adopted, so evidence of some sort. If you could keep that in mind when you do stand up to the mic if you do want to make some sort of comment. If you have questions for Mr. Marshall, you can ask questions of Mr. Marshall if you're an interested party. So is there anybody in the audience who believes they're an interested party and would like to come to the microphone? Feel free to do so, sir. You could. You need to have a mic. There you go.
My name is Harold Hose.
I'm sorry?
Harold Hose, H-O-E-S.
And can you raise your right hand, please? Are you going to give some testimony?
I have some questions. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Okay.
Whatever you want.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, sir?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, we're on Hose Lane up here, and based on what he just said, if, it sounded like he was saying with this proposed road, if we were to go into form-based planning on our property, would this, if this is approved, would this tie this piece of property up to where we'd never be able to develop the back half of it, or do something with it? Because this road goes right through our backyard.
That would be a question for Mr. Marshall.
That's a better question for Kate. I apologize, I'm not familiar with your property, so I'm not sure if I can give you an accurate answer right now. The alignment of the roadway, I think is more conceptual, whether it could be shifted one way or the other to respect your property better, is obviously one of the discussion points that Ms. Baldwin had with her neighbors as far as what they preferred as far as alignments to try to minimize impacts on their future development of their property. So that in the background, it's far enough away, I'll have to apologize, I don't know if I can answer that question right
Okay, but
now.
you just said, once, if this is approved, once you accept form-based planning, then you would be, then this road would be in effect.
Oh, okay, well, let's take a step back. I'll use the microphone. Okay. Right now, form-based zoning is optional. You don't have to do it. Basically, there's two different zoning districts on all the properties in this location. One is the mixed use and the other is form-based zoning. And so that being the background, you almost have two different options if you wanted to do something with your property. But either way, the zoning, whether it be existing or proposed, doesn't mean you have to do anything. That something might occur on either side of you. But in regards to your particular property, you're the controller of that interest.
Because if I was locked into this, then that's the whole back half of my property. This road takes up the back half of my property.
Sir, what I can tell you is that form-based zoning is something that was adopted by the select board. This board just approves
Okay.
specific applications, so that's the specific application. If you have a question about the form-based zoning in general, I think we all do. I have to confess, this is our first hearing with it. We've had a couple, or one or two tutorials. You could probably approach Kate, but outside this particular hearing would be a good place to have that conversation.
Okay. The other question is, this is an old map because these people with the boats have been gone for a number of years. I believe there's another house. This is Collins, this is Borges, and that's another house. Okay. I didn't see that on the map. Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, this is an older ortho photo. It was done, it was a 2004 version to keep the accuracy as far as the horizontal limits. So you will see some changes in the neighborhood. But the house that Mr. Hosier mentioned, we did try to draw that in on
Yep.
top of the ortho photo.
Yep, saw that.
To at least give somebody an understanding of where its location is on the land.
Does anybody else have some testimony to give? If so, step forward. You can use that mic unless you need to be up at the map. Yes,
Jim Collins.
Jim Collins? Yes. Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, sir?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
And I don't know, based on what you said to Mr. Hose, I may have to take it up with Kate, but I want to bring it up here. I'm a neighboring landowner, okay, and to the north. And I represent a large piece of property there, actually about 10 acres, okay? And my concern is we have no
With this application?
No, more for, I just need you to hear this.
Okay.
Because, I mean, you're approving, if you approve this kind of an application, what you're doing, if, I want to block that theoretical road going through my property. So I would probably go to the, what's the regular zoning, half acre lot to
Mhm.
whatever that.
Yeah, just the zoning bylaws that we have, yes?
And should I do that ahead of time now? Because I don't want this theoretical road going through our property. So I want to, should we go out and develop our property now, subdivide it, so that it's in place and you can't, in the future, do this?
We can't give you advice, that's, so that goes outside our, we can only sit and decide actual applications. And I would, and I realize this is new and different, it's new and different for all of us, and I would encourage you to talk with Kate or members of the select board, or maybe Mr. Pierce even.
You want me to just
Sure.
provide a quick?
Yep.
So it's new and it's a little confusing. So kind of to repeat what Dave said, form-based zoning, we have overlay districts to begin with. So we have stormwater and we have various other ones. It's unlike those, it's optional. So you have your underlining zoning already, which is mixed use and residential depending on where you are. Each application for a certain piece of property has no effect and doesn't put an obligation on you to develop your property, whether it be under, we'll call it the old zoning or form-based. So this road, which I think is probably what a lot of people are struggling with, it's a conceptual road that our consultants thought, okay, this might be a good place for a road to kind of divert traffic off of Route 7, decongest everything. But this could be something, they might develop this piece right now, and until every single person wants to opt in, and they certainly never have to, this could be something 40 years down the road. It could be 10 years down the road, but it puts no obligation.
Or whenever the select board changes it.
Well, there's no indication that they will be changing it. I mean, they very purposely made it an opt-in overlay district. So as of right now, and I would say for at least the near future, there's no obligation for anybody to be developing their property as a result of any other application. So I mean, to get back to what Mary was saying, this is solely for 93 Webster Road. And, if I'm more than happy to talk more in detail, because I realize it's confusing. So I invite you to come to the Planning and Zoning Office and we can chat.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Does anybody else have testimony to give? I want to try to be clear that it's not commentary on form-based zoning. It's on this particular application. Ma'am, come forward, give your name, and I'll swear you in.
His wife.
Yeah.
I just have another concern. Pat
Can you-
Collins, I swear to tell the truth or whatever.
Thank you.
The road, the temporary road that's going into Susan's thing is narrow, and this gentleman kind of is saying that this is a temporary road. The Borgia property, which is on Borgia Lane, my dad owns. My daughter's house, my brother's house, and our house is in the back of Borgia Lane. My daughter's house abuts Susan's back line. But if we don't want this road built in our property, it doesn't sound like the Baptist church does, then you have this new road going to nowhere. And the temporary road on Webster Road now becomes a permanent road, which really is part of your job to decide if that's going to be correct, right?
Absolutely, that's correct. Do you have a question of Mr. Marshall or about the application?
Both of you. I mean, you're talking like this is a temporary road, but if both property owners on the north and the south side don't want that road, then it becomes a permanent road. For how many years, I don't know. I mean,
That's right.
okay, so I think that's a concern that is in your lap right now, right? that road.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anything from the board, members of the board? Okay, at this point then, I would move to continue and schedule this for a site visit. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries and,
Schedule it for a time and
Yep.
date.
We have to do time
Yep.
specific.
Yep. The next available hearing will probably be September 21st, so between now and then, or we could move it to November. What do you?
I don't want to do it in November.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's up to you guys. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't need to be
Yeah.
a couple weeks. It could be,
Sure,
you know,
yeah.
Saturday, whatever.
Well, when would you be ready, David, to?
So Mark
if
brings
we're
up a
gonna-
good
we're gonna do
question.
Site visit, I
Yep.
would like to see some
So,
staking where the road is and preparation, so we're not just wandering around.
so you
When
stole
would-
my
when would you-
thunder. I was going to ask the board.
When would you be ready?
How much they wanted, but we were preparing to do the staking of the temporary road as well as the proposed form-based zone road with the property corners at each edge of the roadway.
And are
Okay.
you only gonna do the one, that's curving around the Baptist church, or are you gonna do both?
Well, this application, we only control the 2-acre parcel. So these are shown just more for conceptual of why we drew the roadway on this particular 2-acre parcel and how it can be continued on either side.
But, so, the design that curves, you can see, is still different than, like,
Just go this one,
okay.
larger scale.
Oh, it went like,
Oh, I'm sorry. You're looking for the original conceptual
yeah,
alignment?
so the original
there.
conception, yeah, are you gonna stake that at all, or?
We hadn't planned on it.
Yeah, so it'd make it easier if I don't have to work it out.
So when could you be ready for that, David?
We'll probably need to, the earliest would be probably a week from Saturday in order to be able to schedule the survey crew. and
So
have
that would
work
be
done.
27th
Yeah.
of August?
My preference would be to do it after Labor Day, like that week after Labor Day.
What week is that?
That's, Labor Day is it the 5th or the 6th?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Saturday the 10th, maybe?
What time?
Well, it's a Saturday, so I would
I don't
leave
think I
that
can do it. I
to you
might-
guys if you want to do earlier or later in the day.
Or, I mean, the other thing is to do it right before one of your regularly scheduled hearings,
When's our next hearing?
So that will be
while we still have light.
Yeah.
Right.
the 7th? That's right after Labor Day. Would be right before that.
It's either 7th or the 21st.
Let's do the 7th. I won't be here on the 21st.
Okay. So, like 5 o'clock on the 7th?
Sure.
Does that work for everybody?
Yep. The 7th at 5?
So did you continue this to the 21st? You continued to the 21st, and the site visit is on the 7th, is that right?
Yes.
Well, are you looking for a continuation? Will you be ready to come back for another discussion on the 21st? Dave,
Yes.
or- Okay.
So that works for everybody then? The 7th seems okay though, right? Yeah, so the 7th at 5 p.m.
Yeah,
I think I have to make a
might be
motion.
able to call in.
Okay. So you have to make a motion for that.
To call in?
No, at 7, on the 7th at 5 p.m.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. So, move to schedule a site visit on Saturday, September 7 at, Wednesday, September 7 at 5 p.m. All in favor? Aye.
Why?
All opposed? No. See you on the 7th.
Very good. Thank you for your time.
Back to the 2nd.
You can put me down for the 2nd. She can put me
No.
down for the second. I'll do that.
Okay, now we move on to the appeal A15-10. It's the appeal by Champlain Housing Trust of their notice of violation. This is a continued hearing of that, and I'll give everybody a minute to get organized. While the attorneys are getting set up, I'd like to, if it would be okay with the attorneys, can you get set up and listen to what I'm saying at the same time? Okay. So, we've been, it's been pending for quite some time now, probably 6 weeks at this point, so I thought I would review where we are. The first hearing, we heard testimony from Joe Colangelo, Stephen Leffler, Sean Brown, and Bill Wilson. At the second hearing, we heard testimony from Dean Pierce and Amy Dimitrowitz. And what I'd like to know is who we're going to hear testimony from today. I assume it's going to be Mr. Monty, and there were a couple of other witnesses, Bozick and one other. And if it's going to be via cross or if we're changing the rules at all. And then, of course, I want to know if there's any pending motions. I'll ask the Champlain Housing Trust first.
So I believe that there are only two remaining witnesses, both received we have Margaret.
Hang on a second.
Yeah.
Joe?
We have Margaret Bozick here today. She's pre-filed her direct testimony, and
Yep.
she'll be available for us and for questions from the board. We also have Michael Monty, a PhD. He has pre-filed testimony. I have a small number of additional questions for him by way of additional direct testimony, and he will then be available for us and questions from the board.
Okay.
And I don't think there are any other witnesses.
If I recall correctly, we have redacted testimony from Mr. Monty.
That's correct. A small part of his testimony we can take from.
Ms. Safar, anything on your side that you're,
No surprises.
okay. No motions, nothing? We're just going to jump right in? Is that right? Okay. Whenever you're ready.
You want to have the microphones fixed for them? Or
I
is that-
think they're getting picked up.
Okay, sorry.
Appreciate it. So, this is going to sit there. Are they going to get, maybe you want to move your mic over? It doesn't look like the witness will get picked up on the mic.
Hang on. Are you gonna be able to pick up the audio?
They're gonna have to pick up the mics.
Well, why don't
Well,
we
there's,
just...
there's one right there, so, and then Ms. Safar can use the other one. And then I think, once the witness sits down, you can take that out, Mr. Monty, you can take that, yeah, there you go. Thank you. And if you could one Ms. Safar, and then we can make sure that the witness is heard by the microphone that's sitting next to Ms. Mitchell. Are the parties ready to proceed?
Can I just have one more minute? I'm almost there.
Well, is there anybody in the audience who intends to give testimony today or conduct any examination?
CHT calls Margaret Bozick.
Do you swear or affirm, Ms. Bozick, to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, see? And I'd ask you to keep your voice up just to make sure we capture it on our audio. Do you have any questions of Ms. Bozick? Karen?
Oh, I know.
She's just for press.
Good evening, Ms. Bozick. My name is Claudine Safar, and I, in this hearing, am representing...
Safar, can you keep your voice up so that everybody
We
can
can't hear you.
Okay, sorry. Is this amplifying, though?
Not really.
Not really?
It's really more meant for our at-home audience.
Oh, okay. All right. So, my name is Claudine Safar. At this proceeding, I am representing Joe Colangelo in his capacity as zoning enforcement officer. I have reviewed your direct testimony prior to coming here today. Have you had the opportunity to take a look back at your pre-filed testimony?
Yes.
Okay. And it is, as you sit here today, would you say that everything in that pre-filed testimony is accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any qualifications or additions that you would care to make with regard to the pre-filed testimony that you made?
Not at this time.
Okay. So there's nothing in this pre-filed testimony that you felt was inaccurate or that you'd like to clarify in any way or expand upon?
No.
Okay. So I just have a few questions for you with regard to some of the portions of your pre-filed testimony. You mentioned you're the Associate Director of Asset Management and also Development at CHT. Is that correct?
At the time that the testimony was filed, my job title was Associate Director of Asset Management and Program Development. Subsequently, I've had a title change.
Okay.
I'm now the Director of Asset Management and Special Initiatives.
Okay. And with regard to what you do on a daily basis, how has that changed since the time that you gave this pre-filed testimony?
It has not.
Okay. And with respect to this particular project, it seems that your role was in negotiating the contractual agreements with various agencies with CHT. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And do you have a legal background, Ms. Bozick, at all?
Yes.
Are you an attorney?
I am, although I haven't practiced for 18 years.
Okay. And so in your capacity as an attorney, did you specifically keep a legal eye on the language that was contained in these documents?
No, I don't practice law for CHT.
Okay. And did you draft these agreements?
The agreements were the result of negotiations between the parties, so there was language that went back and forth.
Okay. And did you have the final, did you give the final approval for the contracts as they were drafted?
No.
Okay. Who did that at CHT?
That would have been either Michael or Brenda.
Okay. But did you have input on the language that was contained in those agreements?
Yes.
And if you saw something that you didn't think was appropriate or needed to be changed, did you have the opportunity to give input on that language?
I certainly gave input to the party with whom I was negotiating, yes.
Okay. And in terms of, have you had the opportunity to review Mr. Colangelo's pre-filed testimony in the exhibits that?
No.
Okay. With respect to the particular agreements, we attach those as exhibits 8 and 9, I believe, to Mr. Colangelo's pre-filed testimony. So if you give me 1 second, I can, hopefully I can locate those for you here if you need them to refer to. Oops. hand you what's been marked and entered into evidence as Exhibit 8 of Mr. Colangelo's profile testimony. You can take a minute to take a look at that if you need. Okay, I'm going to ask you to turn to page 4. Of Exhibit 8. So see, I'm looking at paragraph C on page 4. This paragraph provides that that 30 units are guaranteed to DCF. Is that correct?
Yes.
And when you say 30 rooms are guaranteed, that means that 30 rooms are reserved for DCF customers and cannot be used by any other customers or clients.
No, that's not correct. We guarantee to make 30 rooms available, but if DCF doesn't use them, then they become available to others.
Okay. And say on a Monday there are 15 rooms being occupied by DCF clients and there are an additional 15 that are not being occupied by DCF clients, you make those other 15 available?
To the public, yes.
Okay. And what happens if a DCF client comes in that afternoon and there isn't a room?
Well, again, we would know at the point at which we began to rent other rooms that DCF had no more use for the room. That's part of managing the reservations.
So there would be no circumstances where DCF had a situation where they needed a room but they didn't know. Would they tell you at the beginning of the week how many they need, or?
No, they tell us on a daily basis. And the DCF office closes at 4 o'clock. So by 4 o'clock, we have a good sense of how many rooms they're going to use. It's possible that someone could come through the 211 after hours system, but that's generally only a small number of people. So if we had 15 rooms, we would certainly know that they weren't all going to be used by DCF.
Okay, so you would have to know, you wouldn't know until 4 o'clock definitively whether those rooms are going to be occupied. So maybe at 10 o'clock in the morning, you couldn't necessarily be sure that they were all going to be used?
Correct.
Okay. Is there a place that that in this contract or in this agreement that sets this out, that redefines what the word guaranteed means? Because to me, if the word guaranteed, I think is a commonly understood term, would mean that you would be assured those 30 rooms under all circumstances. So is there somewhere that explains, well, you're assured them, but only until 4 o'clock, and then if after 4 o'clock we can give them to somebody else?
Yes, it says that we shall manage the use of the rooms so that there are an adequate number of alternate single units available in case the larger units aren't available, with a provision for the rent reduction. In other words, it explicitly says that we're responsible for managing the use of the rooms so that those rooms will be available for them if they need them.
So they'll be there. If DCF at any point in time needs them, there's 30 rooms that DCF has that they can use.
Yes, if they need them.
Okay. But there's nothing in this contract that restricts that need to a particular time period in the day.
No, that's just as a practical matter how things operate.
Okay. So I'd like you to turn to section D on page 5 of that agreement. And that section reads, CHT shall be responsible for and shall comply with all federal, state, and municipal laws, orders, and regulations, and with all lawful directives of public officers which impose any duty on it, upon it, or the state with respect to the premises. Was there not an order, or was there not a notice of violation from the town which requested that CHT obtain a permit for the use that was presently being conducted on the property?
There was a contested notice of violation, yes.
Okay, and CHT did not comply with the requests in that notice of violation?
We didn't understand what the notice of violation was requesting us to do.
You didn't understand that the notice of violation was asking you to get a permit?
We have a permit.
You have a permit, but the notice explained in the prior letter that there was a prior letter, a letter prior to the notice that came to CHT in September, correct? And that...
Just objection. I'm not sure I understand the relevance of this line of questioning. Ms. Safari seems to be suggesting that CHT... Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay, so is it your belief that you were in compliance with this provision in the contract?
Yes.
I'm going to ask you to turn to the MOU, which has got a base stamp of CHT 001.
Is this Exhibit 9, Mr. Farr? I don't have a base stamp on any of my Exhibit 8.
Yeah, this is Exhibit 9. Sorry, I apologize.
CHT
001. And this is an MOU between VCF and CHT, correct?
Wait a minute, hang on a second. I think we
Okay.
all have, we have a revised Exhibit 9, is that right?
It was. I'm not. You can use it.
I'm okay. I think I'm okay. Go ahead.
Are you okay?
The first document in this exhibit is an MOU between the State of Vermont's Champlain Housing Trust, Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity, Women Helping Battered Women, and the Community Health Centers of Burlington.
Okay, and that's got a base stamp of CHT 001?
Yes.
Okay, and in paragraph 3, how does this MOU describe what Harbor Place is going to be providing?
Short-term transitional housing.
Short-term transitional housing. It doesn't call it motel housing, hotel housing, it calls it transitional housing, correct?
In that whereas clause, it does, yes.
Okay. And the second whereas clause from the bottom, that contract provides that CHT will, at the premises, provide on-site case management and support services, correct?
No.
Okay, what is it?
It says the parties wish to provide for on-site case management, not that CHT will be providing
Okay,
it.
so on-site case management will be occurring on the property?
Yes.
Okay. And in fact, it does occur on the property? Correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that case management involves a case manager going and meeting with various clients of different organizations?
Yes.
On site?
Yes.
And there's also, as you understood when you were negotiating, there's also medical services that are provided to some of the clients of UVM Medical Center, correct?
We have an MOU with UVM Medical Center. I frankly don't, I would have to look at it to see what it says.
Okay.
But it certainly was my understanding that to the extent there were going to be visiting nurse services or something else that people needed, that would be happening, yes.
And you understood that at the time that you were negotiating the MOU with UVM?
I don't know that I understood it at that point in time. I certainly understood it subsequently.
Okay. And so what did you understand at the time that you were negotiating the MOU
We-
with UVM? that they were going to be doing on site.
Can we look at the document?
Sure.
Claudine, could you help her find it? I don't know that she knows
Yeah, I was going to
which
go
one it
I was
is.
going to go through them one by one, but so I have to look for it myself. Okay, so this is base stamp CHT 017.
We're now on Exhibit 10.
I don't think so. I think we're still on 9.
Well,
Nope.
I think we're on 10.
We're on time.
It's a memorandum of understanding, is that correct?
You know what, I think you're right, the 10 flipped onto, do you have that?
I do,
You
yes.
Okay, so she does have it, sorry. You're right, it is 10. 10 was on the back page for me, okay, yep. So I think, can I get the question read back? My question was, at the time that you negotiated the MOU, what did you understand would be happening? What types of services did you understand UVM to be providing their patients at CHT? At Harbor Place.
Ms. Farr, do you want the question read back, or are you?
Yeah, can you read the question back?
And so what did you understand at the time that you were negotiating the MOU with UVM that they were going to be doing on site?
I understood that Fletcher Allen would be arranging for third-party medical respite services as appropriate.
And did those services also include sending nurses to check on patients that were at Harbor Place?
Visiting nurses, yes. Yes.
And those visiting nurses would be, what was your understanding that they would be doing?
That they would be providing the same kind of services that they would be providing to people once they had left the hospital.
Okay, and that could include administering medication, for example?
I didn't have any understanding of that level of detail.
Okay. And in this MOU between CHT and Fletcher Allen, this describes the housing at Harbor Place as temporary housing, correct?
Can you point us to?
Sure, I'm looking at the third or fourth whereas clause.
The last whereas clause?
1, 2, 3. The fifth whereas clause.
Yes, in the whereas clause, that's, yes.
Okay. And in the second whereas clause, it also refers to the type of housing at Harbor Place as transient housing, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to go back to Exhibit 9, which I'm looking now at CHT 005. This is an agreement between CHT and the Lund Center.
We're back to 8?
I believe it's 9.
9. 005. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So this agreement also describes the housing at Harbor Place as temporary housing, correct?
Yes.
I'm looking at CHT 007. This is an Exhibit 10. This is an MOU between Champlain Housing Trust and Lund as well. I'm looking at paragraph 3, which, well, first of all, I'm looking at the second whereas clause. That describes the housing at Harbor Place as short-term housing, correct?
Yes.
And paragraph 3 describes services that will be provided by Lund on premises. And this MOU includes providing residents with medical providers, social service providers, and/or CHT facilitating conflict resolution.
Can you
working-
tell us the paragraph?
Paragraph 3.
Thank you.
Working with residents to meet responsibilities of daily living, such as developing living or monthly household budgets, searching for permanent housing. Is all of that accurate for what Lund does on the property?
No, and it's not an accurate description of what the contract says. It doesn't say they're going to be meeting with medical providers. It says advocating on behalf of residents with medical providers.
Okay, and so that means that you will be providing them support with respect to medical decision-making, or what does that mean exactly?
Well, CHT's not doing that.
Lund is?
Yes.
Yes. So my question was, is Lund doing all of these things in this list in paragraph 3?
What Lund is primarily doing is helping people to search for permanent housing arrangements. The other things that they do are ancillary to that housing search.
Okay, but when you entered into this, when CHT entered into this MOU, which you assisted in negotiating, you understood that they could be providing all of the services listed in item 3, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And are you aware of any other hotel in this area or anywhere that provides services such as the ones listed in item 3?
I'm aware that there are hotels that have doctors on call. In terms of the remaining items, I don't know.
Okay. So you don't know, you're not aware of any other hotel that provides these types of services?
No.
I'm looking at CHT 009, which appears to be an MOU between CHT and Safe Harbor Health Center. Is it accurate for me to state that this MOU describes in the second whereas clause the type of housing that Harbor Place will be providing as short-term housing?
It says that we would be providing short-term housing.
Okay. And in the final whereas clause, it states SHHC wishes to be able to obtain temporary housing for its clients. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And again, in paragraph 4, it again describes the use as temporary housing.
Yes.
Correct? Okay. Nowhere in this MOU does it describe the use as a motel use or a hotel use or anything of that nature, does it?
In paragraphs 1 and 2, it talks about the actual operational terms of the rent, and it says that rooms will be rented on a daily or weekly basis.
Okay. But in terms of describing the type of use, it doesn't describe it as a hotel or motel use.
Again, functionally it does. It doesn't use the word motel.
Okay. All right, and I'm looking at CHT 011, which again is another MOU between Safe Harbor Health Center and CHT. Again, fair to say that paragraph 4 describes, paragraph 4 and also the final whereas clause describe the use at Harbor Place to be temporary housing.
Yes.
And paragraph 5 describes that SHHC shall provide on-site comprehensive case management and support services to their clients. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And again, it goes through a list of very similar types of offerings that was described in the MOU between CHT and Lund. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
I'm looking at CHT 013. This is a memorandum of understanding between CHT and Pathways Vermont. Again, fair to say that this MOU describes the use of the property at Harbor Place as either short-term housing or temporary housing.
Yes.
beat a dead horse, but just to get through it, I think, would it be fair to say that the same is also true of the description of the remainder of the MOUs that exist between CHT and CVOED, which is the Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity, which is CHT 020, also describes the use as temporary housing?
Yes.
And the same is also true of the MOU between CHT, which is CHT 022, and the Howard Center?
Yes, again, in the whereas clauses, yes.
Okay. Same is also, after all, the last question. Okay, do you know, you describe in your pre-filed testimony on question 11, question posed to you was, does CHT advertise the availability of rooms at Harbor Place to walk-in customers? And your response was, since fall of 2015, a vacancy sign has been posted at Harbor Place when fewer than 50 of the 58 rooms are occupied. Do you know how many times that vacancy sign was posted outside?
I can't give you an exact count, but I know it's been up almost every day, certainly for the last couple of months.
Okay, and the MOU in this case was issued in October of 2015, correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
I'm sorry, I said MOU. The NOV in this case was issued in October of 2015, correct?
I would have to look at it. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay, so in your response to question 11, did you mean that the vacancy sign was posted after the NOV was served on Harbor Place?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, so you don't know how many times, if ever, that vacancy sign was posted prior to the issuance of the NOV?
I don't know, no.
Okay. And as you sit here today, you don't know even how many times since the service of the NOV that vacancy sign has been posted?
On a daily count, no.
Okay. And would you agree with me that at the time of the beginning of this proceeding, there was not a single off-the-street customer that had ever stayed at Harbor Place?
I would agree that no one decided to stay. I've been there when there have been walk-in customers that have come in.
Okay, and how many times has that happened?
Well, when I was there once, and I know from the manager it's happened more than once.
Okay, so it's happened once since...
No, it's happened once when I was there.
Okay. But again, you're not aware of any off-the-street customers staying or renting a room at Harbor Place?
Again, the one time that I was there when someone walked in, they asked for the rates, and we gave them to them, and they said it's too expensive, and they left.
And were they someone that was affiliated with a client that was already staying there?
No, not to my knowledge. It was a stranger.
And how do you know that?
I know they weren't referred by anyone.
They weren't referred by anyone, but you don't know if they were a family member of a referral or anything like that?
No, I don't know that.
don't have anything further.
Any redirect?
I do have a few questions. Did the board want to go first, or should I? No? Okay. Ms. Bozick, Attorney Safar asked you about your policy regarding the 30 rooms reserved to DCF, and you explained that if not all those rooms are occupied by late afternoon, around 4 o'clock, you would offer them to non-DCF referrals to other people. Is DCF aware that you do that?
Yes.
And has DCF had any issue with that?
No.
Okay, so that's the way you've operated under the agreement?
Yes.
Okay. Attorney Safar pointed out that a number of the agreements that CHT has with the other agencies or with the other organizations use the terms temporary housing, transient housing, or short-term housing. When those agreements were being put together, were you and the other organizations attempting to use terms as they are defined in the town of Shelburne zoning bylaws, or as they're used in common language?
We were not attempting to use any definitions under the bylaws. Our understanding was that temporary, transient, transitional were all used to distinguish a non-permanent housing situation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think that a typical motel provides temporary housing, transient housing, or short-term housing as those terms are used in common language?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know why CHT didn't post its vacancy sign at Harbor Place until fall of 2015?
We were asked when we first opened not to take walk-in traffic, so we didn't post a vacancy sign in compliance with that request from the town. We came back and asked several times for clarification on that point and didn't get it. So at a certain point, we put the vacancy sign up, but Michael Monty would be better able to speak to that than I am.
Okay. I have no other questions.
You said you asked for clarification. Did you personally ask for clarification?
No, Michael asked for clarification.
Were you there during those conversations where Michael asked for clarification?
I was there for at least one of them, yes.
And which one was that?
I'm not going to be able to tell you that right now. Again, Michael would be in a better position to answer that.
So who was there when you asked for clarification?
The police chief was there. I think there may have been members of the select board there. The zoning administrator, Ms. Jaratowski, was there, I believe. That's all I'm going to be able to remember.
And what specifically was asked?
We were asked for clarification about, because we were getting conflicting messages about what the town wanted us to do. So we reminded people that we'd been asked not to accept walk-in traffic, and asked if there was a change in position on that, and didn't get an answer.
Who asked you not to take walk-in traffic?
The police chief.
And he asked you specifically?
No, he asked Mr. Monty.
Okay, and were you there when he asked?
No.
And is it CHC's position that the police chief has the ability to abrogate the zoning ordinance in some way?
I can't speak to that.
Okay, and so then why is it that the CHC took the position that if the police chief wanted something, even if it may have been in violation of the zoning ordinance, that they would do what the police chief asked?
We had no way of knowing that that would be in violation of the zoning ordinance.
Well, you have counsel, don't you?
Ms. Safar, it's getting rather argumentative, and it's a legal point. I'd ask you to move on. Does anybody from the board have questions of Ms. Bozick? We'll start at the end and work our way back.
Hi. So when you were talking about the fees for that CHT charges for people who are staying, whether it's DCF, Lund, whoever you're working with, versus someone who's coming in off the streets. So something like DCF is looking at $28 a night for the single kitchenette. Do you know if that's right?
That was the original, no, wait. The original charge was $28 for a single room. The price for a kitchenette room was slightly higher. The rates have increased over time.
Okay. Have the rates for the public, that you're charging the public, increased over time?
They have not.
Okay. And do you know from your, are you the one that decides those rates?
No, I was not the decision maker. I did the research on what other local motels were charging and discussed with senior management what rates might be appropriate.
The research is surrounding hotels. What were they charging for walk-in customers?
So we looked at what the Days Inn and Quality Inn were charging for peak rates and for off-season rates, and decided on a rate that was in between the two. We were looking to set a rate that would be high enough to discourage rooms being rented purely for criminal activity, but yet would be low enough to still be competitive with surrounding motels.
But could you share the rates that you found for surrounding motels?
I'm not going to remember those rates at this point in time, no.
But you, to your knowledge, roughly $140 was competitive for the surrounding area.
It was an amount that was between the peak rate and the off-season rate, yes.
And your guys' rates didn't change between, that was just year-round?
That's correct.
Okay. And then going back to the example that Claudine was talking about before, so it's before 4 p.m., DCF hasn't closed their offices yet, and you guys have one room left. And someone from the public walks in, and they ask to rent a room. What do you guys do?
If we had only one room available and the remaining 58 had all been rented, at that point, DCF would have probably used all 30 of its rooms.
But hypothetically, if they hadn't?
Well, if they hadn't, we would hold it available for them.
Okay, so the member of the public would be turned away?
The person who had walked in would be turned away, yes.
Okay. And then I know we touched on the vacancy sign before, but who would be someone who would know? Did you guys keep track at all of how many times the vacancy sign had been posted before the notice of violation was issued?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Mr. McCray?
I just have one question. If somebody from the general public who's, not a referral, could they make a reservation for a future date to stay at Harbor Place?
Yes, they could.
And how would they do that? Just over the phone or?
Over the phone or by walking in and making a reservation, yes.
Okay, because I know.
Because again, there's 30 that are pre-booked.
Okay.
There's another 29 that are available. So yes, someone could come in and certainly reserve one of those.
But Harbor Place doesn't come up as an option when you search for hotels online.
I don't know.
I've looked on hotel.com and Expedia, and it doesn't. The Econo Lodge used to, but Harbor Place does not.
We're not, as far as I know. I think you have to, well, I shouldn't say that. I'd be speculating. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Is that it?
Yep.
Mark?
I have no question.
Ms. Bozick, I have a few questions. Does Harbor Place pay rooms and meals tax?
We do not. We asked that question of the Vermont Department of Taxes before we opened, and got a letter saying that because we were a nonprofit, we do not have to pay rooms and meals taxes.
And you, other than posting a vacancy sign, Harbor Place does no advertising?
Not at this point, no.
Did it ever?
Before we opened, we planned to do some advertising. But again, once we were asked not to accept walk-in traffic, we drew back from that.
And that was the police chief?
Yes.
And you would rely on Mr. Monti to
Yes.
amplify that?
Yes.
And forgive me, we will have transcripts to review, so this might have been something that Mr. Brown testified to. Are you aware whether the state of Vermont DCF enters into written contracts with other motels to reserve rooms, such as the memorandum of understanding that we discussed earlier with you this evening?
I can't speak to that.
Thank you. Sorry, didn't mean to be dismissive of this. That's all I have. All right. Any questions? Sure.
So just going back to the rates for the public, you testified earlier about how you personally had heard of members of the public walk in looking to rent a night but left after hearing and saying that the rates were too high. At any point, did CHT entertain discussion about lowering your rates because potential customers were walking away?
We've had a number of discussions about possibly changing our business model in light of some other changes, but again, Mr. Monti's in a better position to speak to that than I am.
Anything else? Council, anything else?
No, nothing for me.
Thank you, Ms. Bozick. You can step down.
We'd like to call Michael Monti.
Mr. Monti, will you raise your right hand? Do you stay standing, please, sir? Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Right.
Mr. Monti, CHT's current contract with DCF reserves 30 rooms for use by people who use the DCF vouchers to pay. Do you anticipate that there will be any changes to that agreement in the near future?
Yeah, we've been, DCF has requested to reduce that contract to 20, and we've indicated that we would be willing and ready to do that soon. And so we're working through the details of how that works.
Okay. Do you know when that's likely to happen?
It should be soon. I just got a call from Sean Brown just a couple of days ago, so I expect that they're asking us to do that fairly quickly. They made the request a few months ago.
Okay. Will the 10 rooms that will no longer be reserved under the DCF contract be made available to walk-in customers?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we've been running at a fairly low vacancy of about 40 or so a night, 44 a night. That's the reason why DCF wants to reduce the number in terms of their contract. So we're working through right now a business plan to do what we thought about we would do initially, which was take walk-in customers and over-the-counter customers and give people an opportunity to make reservations online.
You just said that you'd recently had low vacancy. I just want to clarify, did you mean to say that you've had low occupancy?
Low occupancy in terms of the number of units. Every day, I along with a few others, received a number of folks who are there, and it's been fairly consistent that we have 44 rooms, guests in 44 rooms, 45 rooms in that number.
Is CHT planning to advertise Harbor Place in any ways that it hasn't in the past?
Yes, we do.
Okay, and what are your plans?
Well, initially, when we first opened up, when we became extremely busy and felt we had no available rooms, we were going to be contacting other associations, the Chamber of Commerce, Automobile Association, and others to sort of see what kind of agreements and contracts we can get into. Just a few days ago, we began to research and understand what online services might be good for us as, for the motel.
Okay. I have a few questions for you about some of the things that you talk about in your pre-filed testimony and some of your exhibits to that testimony. So I'm just going to give you a copy of it.
Okay.
And the board, of course, should already have one. So in your written testimony, you talk about, let me just see where you discuss that. Well, you say in your pre-filed testimony that you were first notified by the town that Harbor Place might not meet the definition of a motel in a letter that you received from the former zoning enforcement officer, Annie Jaratowski, on June 17th of 2015. And that letter is Exhibit A to your testimony, if you could take a look at that.
Exhibit A.
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
Does that letter explain why Harbor Place doesn't meet the definition of a motel?
It does not.
Okay. In your written testimony, you talk about a meeting that you had with Ms. Jaratowski in August of 2015, so a couple months after you received the June letter, to talk about Harbor Place. And did she tell you during that meeting that Harbor Place didn't meet the definition of a motel under the bylaws?
I believe she did, and she suggested that we seek a permit for a use similar to
Okay.
a motel.
Did Ms. Jaratowski explain during that meeting why she didn't think Harbor Place was a motel under the bylaws?
Not specifically. There was some discussion about that we were not a motel because we were providing, I think, transient housing. And that meant that folks who were homeless, therefore then, were not members of the public.
Okay. I wanna, if you would turn to your pre-filed testimony at page 6. And you say at the bottom of that page that Ms. Jaratowski, you said she did focus on the fact that Harbor Place guests were typically not from away and many were homeless. So are you saying now that you recall that her main opinion as to why Harbor Place was not a motel was because its customers were primarily homeless people? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's my testimony. And
Well, isn't she Ms. Kukowski, a representative of the town?
I think she's a former zoning administrator, but I think that if she's not the one who brought the NOD,
She worked for the town of Shelburne as a zoning enforcement officer.
she did.
I'm going to allow the testimony.
Thank you. During that meeting in August, did Ms. Jaratowski tell you at any time that Harbor Place was not a motel because of the type of services that it offered to its guests?
no,
Okay. Did she at any time during that meeting tell you that Harbor Place wasn't a motel because many of its guests were referred under its contracts with DCF and other organizations?
Mrs. Tyler, I have to ask you, you have to keep your voice up. I can hardly hear you.
Oh, I think it sounds to me like the microphone is more amplified than it is. So
No, it's
I
pretty
think
amplified, but I
yeah.
can still hardly hear you. And
Okay.
I'm going to guess that people in the audience,
I'll be louder.
that would be good.
Okay. Did you hear my last
Yes,
question,
I did.
Mr. Monty?
Yeah. She did not.
Maybe you could repeat it.
Oh,
'cause I didn't
yeah,
hear
you
it.
want to
Okay.
repeat it?
Could you read it back, please?
Sorry.
Did she at any time at that meeting tell you that Harbor Place wasn't a motel because many of its guests were referred under its contracts with CHT and other organizations?
No, there was no discussion of contracts that I recall.
Okay. The notice of violation issued to CHT is Exhibit D to your pre-filed testimony. Would you turn to that, please?
Yes.
Does the NOV explain the facts that establish why Harbor Place is not a motel under the bylaws?
Not in my opinion. It doesn't certainly talk about the conversations we've had here, which we talked about contracts and other agreements we have had.
When you reviewed the NOV, did you understand why the town thought Harbor Place was in violation?
Well, we feel real clear that we're providing hotel, motel rooms to members of the public. They just simply have to be members of the public that are lower income.
Mm-hmm.
And so we didn't feel we were in violation whatsoever. We also looked at this list of uses and didn't see anything in particular on this list of uses that was defined well enough for in the zoning ordinance after we received it, or did we believe that we actually provided any of these uses at the motel site.
The NOV states that Harbor Place, you just referred to the list of uses. So the NOV says that Harbor Place had created dwelling units, created multifamily dwellings, added short-term residential service use, emergency housing use, temporary housing use, transitional housing use, medical office use, and business and professional office use. You know, does the NOV explain any of the facts that establish those uses at Harbor Place?
It doesn't, and let me just add, we are a provider of a wide range of housing programs, and also have hundreds of square feet of commercial space. We understand what these things are. We've leased to medical offices. We've leased to professional offices. We know what transitional housing is.
Mm-hmm.
We know what emergency housing is, and that's not what we're doing at Harbor Place.
Mm-hmm. When you read the NOV, did you understand why the town thought that you were making those uses of the property?
No.
Okay. Did you have any idea how CHT would need to change its use of the property to come into compliance based on what was stated in the NOV?
There's nothing in the NOV that says anything particular about that, no.
Mm-hmm. Before he issued the NOV, had zoning administrator Mr. Colangelo ever made any suggestions to you about how Harbor Place could come into compliance and satisfy his concerns?
We've had numerous meetings with select board members and also with Joe, with the chief of police as well. I think one of the meetings, the zoning administrator was there, and numerous conversations and emails. We've mostly talked about the types of people who are coming to the motel. There was a suggestion that at one point that there was a belief in that only women and children should come to the motel. At some point, there was a request for, and I think that meeting is in the meeting notes of the service agencies that met at the town offices. And at that meeting, there was a conversation about a better screening process for the people who would come to the motel. And Joe's communication to me was principally about reinforcing that. Also, there was communication around police services and paying for police services, which we did. So those are the general communications we've had.
Mm-hmm.
There was meetings before the select board, which were different. I'm not too sure if that's relevant or not, but we could certainly talk about that.
Do you remember who specifically told you that the town might not be concerned about Harbor Place if it only accepted women and children as guests?
That was, I believe that was in the conversation with Joe. Joe felt that's what he believed the Harbor Place was going to be, and he was looking for better screening policies for people.
And how else did they want you to screen people? Was it just that only women and children should be guests, or were there other issues that people should be screened for?
There was a range of issues. I mean, there was a range of issues around other, perhaps criminal activity or criminal behavior.
Okay.
That were looking for screening. But the thought was women and children would be a better population of guests that we would have.
When did you first understand that Mr. Colangelo thought Harbor Place didn't meet the definition of a motel, in part because of your contracts with DCF and with the other organizations?
I think is when these proceedings began with depositions and just the conversations we've been having here. The requests for the contracts only came as part of this process. And so before that, we were always clear that we were having agreements with individual organizations about guests who may need what we like to think of as concierge services for lower income people. It wasn't until we got into this process that was seen as a violation.
So when you refer to this process, are you talking about the discovery process before
Yes,
this hearing?
the discovery process.
Okay. And how about, you just talked about the concierge services that you provide. When was the first time you understood that Mr. Colangelo viewed those services as something that took CHT out of compliance with the zoning, with the bylaws?
I'm not sure if I understand the question. I think it's at the same time. I think it's throughout this process. It was certainly not the notice, but it was during discovery.
Okay. There was some conversation with Ms. Bozick about why CHT didn't hang a vacancy sign until the fall of 2015, and the fact that you were asked at some point not to take walk-in customers. Can you elaborate on that? When was that request made? Who was present? Who specifically made the request?
Sure. It was made once with a former town manager and the chief of police, where we were discussing the operations of the motel, and we said we were planning on, we weren't too sure how many folks were going to be able to stay at the motel, and we were planning on putting a vacancy sign up and begin to sort of make it available to a wider range of members of the public. And at that point, it was suggested that no, we don't want you to do that. We don't want to have over-the-counter people walking in. The motel previous owner had a history of drugs and prostitution at the motel, and I think the chief of police was asking us not to sort of continue that and to change the sort of dynamic of the motel as it had operated. On another occasion, I think the zoning administrator talked about this. I was at a meeting where there was some discussion about whether there should be a vacancy sign up or not, and I basically asked Joe directly, the chief doesn't want me to do that. I'm not too sure what the zoning administrator is asking us to do. What should we do here? And I didn't get any guidance about whether that was appropriate or not. We did begin to put up a vacancy sign when we began to see numbers going down, and that happened April or May. Where the vacancy sign is, I can't really recall. I can't really tell you how often, but it was before the NOV. I think Margaret testified to how many people have come actually to the door. But based upon our change in the contract with the state and the number of rooms that we do have available, we're going to be changing our business model at this point and making it more widely available.
Do you remember who was present when the police chief asked you not to take walk-in customers?
Again, the former town manager.
What was his name?
Paul Boney.
And was it your understanding that he was the zoning administrator at that time? Or enforcement officer, is what I meant to say.
I got to tell you that I've been very confused about who is who in this context, because we've gone before the select board, 2 or 3 meetings where we're talking to folks, and select board is making requests of us, and Joe is their staff, and then he's also now the zoning administrator of making enforcement decisions, and so it's been not always clear to me.
Did Mr. Boney hear the police chief ask you not to take
Yeah.
walk-in customers?
Yes, that's right.
And did he have any objection to that?
No, not at all.
Okay. I don't have any other questions, thank you.
Okay, we're going to go into a seventh inning stretch for about 10 minutes. Sorry, but it's kind of going a little bit late, and we are going to conclude tonight at 10 o'clock, if not sooner. Do you think that's possible, Ms. Safar? Okay. Ready?
Mr. Monti, you spoke a little bit about CHT's intentions going forward, and I think you had mentioned that CHT's intentions moving forward are to reduce the number of number of rooms offered to DCF from 30 to 20. Is that correct?
That was their request, and we're ready to do that with them, yes.
Okay, but that's not something that you did prior to the issuance of the NOV, correct?
The NOV was a year ago, more or less, or, no, that's
So
right.
as you sit here today, that hasn't been done.
It is, we have agreed to it, and we just have to pick a date for that to happen.
And at the time, up to the time of the NOV, you also have been asked about advertising. You said you have an intention of advertising moving forward, but at the time of the issuance of the NOV, there was no formal advertising, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You testified that, just a minute ago, that you had not ever been asked for, that the contractual agreements between CHT and the agencies were never an issue until this process started with the appeal.
Objection, that's not exactly what he said.
Okay, well, then I may have misunderstood. What exactly did
What I said was that the agreements were not a basis for disqualifying the use as a motel. That the agreements, no one indicated to us that by these agreements, therefore then we were not a motel.
Okay, so if I may ask the reporter to read back your testimony,
All right.
because I think I'm a little bit confused.
Can you give me a keyword or something?
Agreements.
Oh, no.
All right.
While the court reporter's looking, let's go off the record just for a moment. What's the concern, Ms. Safar? About, the dispute is that Mr. Monti.
What am I trying to?
Yeah.
What am I trying to do here?
Yeah.
I think. You're gonna ask me to get to the punchline, I guess.
Well, let's hold off. Let's see what you have.
I think this is a question that you wanted, Ms. Safar. Actually, this was, again, a question by Ms. Allen, correct?
Correct.
To Mr. Monti.
Correct.
Attorney Safar pointed out that a number of the agreements that CHT has with the other agencies, with the other organizations, use the terms temporary housing, transient housing, or short-term housing. When those agreements were being put together, were you and the other organizations attempting to use terms as they are defined in the town of Shelburne zoning bylaws, or as they're used in common language? Answer, we were not attempting to use any definitions under the bylaws. My understanding was that temporary, transient, and transitional were all used to distinguish a non-permanent housing situation.
I don't think that's what she was after.
Too far back.
Yes.
It was after that. It was, Mr. Monti was addressing when he first understood these agreements.
Punch in the word discovery, Chris.
Okay, actually, I think I have it. The answer, well, initially when we first opened up, when we became extremely busy and felt we had no available rooms, I think that's, we're going to get into agreements here in a second. We were going to be contacting other associations, the Chamber of Commerce, that one, no, keep going.
Do a search for the word discovery, because that's, Mr. Monty used that word, or maybe.
Discovery process?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe you don't.
So when you refer to this process, are you talking about the discovery process before this hearing? Answer yes to the discovery process, and see if you have a question.
It would be before that, yeah.
When did you first understand that Mr. Colangelo thought Harbor Place didn't meet the definition of a motel, in part because of the other contracts with DCF and the other organizations? That
Yep.
one, the answer to that? I think it's when these proceedings began with depositions and just the conversations we've been having here. The requests for the contracts only came as part of this process. And so before that, we were always clear that we were having agreements with individual organizations about guests who may need what we like to think of as concierge service for lower income people. And it wasn't until we got into this process that that was seen as a violation.
Great, that's what I'm looking for. So I think what you just said, and what I just heard, is the request for these contracts came through this process, through the deposition and discovery process. Is that what you were trying to say?
No, I didn't say that. I think I said was we weren't aware that we're in having these agreements were somehow a violation of operating a motel.
Okay.
And I don't think that's different than that.
So did you misspeak earlier?
Unless I got some other language going on in my head that I don't understand, but I don't think that's separate or different than what I've said earlier.
Okay, so when you said that the request for the contracts didn't happen until this proceeding, what did you mean by that?
I'll say it again because I'm not exactly sure what you're getting at. What I said was that no one indicated to us that being in an agreement with anyone else was somehow a violation of zoning. And only when the process began, during discovery, was that brought up as an issue that we were in violation. No one mentioned it. We've been doing that, and everybody knew about that for a year and a half or so. And until the depositions and discovery happened, that became the basis for that seemed to be the basis for the violation.
Okay, but you were asked for those contracts a long time ago, were you not?
I don't recall ever being asked except for through the deposition.
Okay, and
so I don't know. That's what I'm saying. When we were issued a notice of violation, and I think really into the process of depositioning and all of that, there was a request for these agreements, and that became the issue.
okay, and so it's your testimony, just to be clear, that you don't ever recall CHT being asked for these contracts?
Clear to me that I don't ever recall that. That's right.
Okay, and I'm going to hand you what I would like to have marked as exhibit, I want to say it's 14. I'm not sure where we left it.
I think, let's see. I go up to Exhibit 12, but it's possible that you marked more and I don't have them in my book. It was 13 added? So 14.
Yeah, there was.
May I mark them as 14 and 15?
Sure. Can we just get an idea of what they are?
14 is a letter from Annie Garatowski to Mr. Monty, specifically asking for a list of documents.
Is that the letter dated July 22, 2015?
I think the first letter is an exhibit to Mr. Monty's.
Yeah, I was going to say it's
testimony,
probably
in fact,
Exhibit B.
actually. Yeah, that's correct.
And
So I don't think that needs to be an exhibit.
what's the other one?
The second one is a response from my firm to her letter.
Okay. But I don't believe that's an exhibit.
No, it's not.
So do you want to start with Exhibit B, and then that way we'll...
Is that in here?
So I'm not here.
It's going to be in your big... You can mark it B and hand it to them, and that way it'll be a little faster.
The one to July 22nd?
So are you handing the witness Exhibit B?
I'm handing him Exhibit B if he already has it.
Okay, yes, it says that there was names of and reimbursement rates for organization agencies that contract with CSU to provide housing.
Okay, so in fact, you just read off bullet point number 1, or the first bullet point, and in fact, Ms. Garatowski on June 22nd, 2015 asks you for those contracts that CSU has, doesn't she?
Yes, she does.
Okay, so, and this is a letter addressed to you?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And in fact, Ms. Garatowski asks for a number of other things in her consideration of CHT's compliance with zoning. Does she not?
She asked for a bunch of information here.
So CHT had knowledge, at least back in June of 2015, that these issues were being considered by, at that time, the zoning administrator to determine whether CHT was in compliance, correct?
So my answer would be that the letter July 22nd asked for this information. What I stated was that there was nothing in particular that was stated except through this process, which said that somehow having agreements was in violation of the zoning ordinance, that somehow that meant that we were no longer a motel. And that's what I stated clearly, and I think that that was my principal point.
Okay, and I'm going to hand you now what is marked as Exhibit 14. Do you recognize that document?
Yeah, I think so. I might have gotten a copy of this. I don't know. My attorney's name is on it, so maybe.
Okay.
I can't really attest that I've seen this.
Okay, and so are you aware of what your attorney's response was to Ms. Garatowski?
You want me to read it to you?
No, I'm just wondering if you were familiar with that document and if you were aware of what his response was.
I can't say I'm familiar with the document. I can't. I just don't recall it. And the response is basically saying that the attorney believes that this goes beyond the bounds of potentially relevant information.
Okay, and so in other words, your CHT through its counsel refused to provide those documents.
Can we have the
You
date?
have to ask the council that.
We have the date of the letter?
Yes. It's July 9th, 2015. And so at that time, were you aware that CHT did not or refused through its counsel to provide that information?
I'm just not recalling that one way or the other.
Okay, so one other thing I want to ask you about that you had said was that Ms. Garatowski at some of these meetings focused on the fact that some of the customers for some of the contracts which you hold are homeless. Is that accurate?
She indicated, I believe she indicated, and it was all verbal, that we were providing transient housing for homeless, and therefore then we were not a motel.
Okay, so she told you that you weren't a motel because you were providing transient housing.
That's what she said.
Okay. And
That's what she believed. And that's why she said we should be coming in as a use similar to a motel.
okay, and if you did that, she told you that you should apply for a permit. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So in fact, CHT did know what the town was asking it to do, which was to come in and apply for a permit.
Yes, that's exactly right. But we are asserting here that we don't need a permit, that in fact we're operating a motel and we're serving the public.
Okay, I just want to be clear because I wasn't sure that I understood your testimony when Ms. Tyler was examining. It sounded like you were saying that CHT had no idea what to do.
There was really no guidance or clarification about what we were going to do differently. from operating as a motel that was different than what we were doing. There was simply nothing that was provided at that.
Okay, but wasn't Ms. Gurtowski simply telling you that you just needed to come in and get a different kind of permit?
She said the use was similar to a motel, which provided zero guidance and clarification to us, because we felt we were in fact a motel, and so therefore then we had no specific guidance around how that would be different.
And from your prior testimony, in regard to Ms. Gurtowski's focus on the homeless aspect of the clients, is it your allegation, as you sit here today, that Ms. Gurtowski was somehow being discriminatory?
Can I just interject here for a second? I'm just trying to figure out why the basis for the notice of violation, as stated in the notice itself or Ms. Gurtowski's first two letters, has any bearing on what we have to decide. What I think we have to decide is whether or not what's operating now is in compliance with the bylaws and the ordinances. It may well be that the town officer has said some things that amount to admissions, but the fact that the hotel or the CHT had little guidance because the notice of violation was written or was not a paragon of clarity has little bearing on what we have to decide. So I would like to hear first from Ms. Farr and then from Ms. Tyler why a sloppy NOV, if that's what the allegation is, has any bearing anymore, since, you know, it's, I guess I'm thinking of it in terms of like an indictment or an information with of a crime that, you know, sets forth the affidavit that's over-inclusive of facts. So if your claim is that this is a sloppy NOV and we didn't have enough guidance to be able to fix it, I would think that that would be a legal argument that you would interpose in a memorandum of law. I think we get that that's the point that's being made here, but how is that relevant to the substantive determination that we as a board have to make with respect to whether or not a violation has occurred? Ms. Safar?
Well, I think two things. One, I think you're right that the determination the board needs to make is whether there's compliance, but I think the question is whether there was compliance at the time of the issuance of the NOV. I don't think that there's any relevance to what they're deciding to do going forward, because that doesn't, frankly, that doesn't matter. But the reason why I chose to inquire about that is because I think it bolsters the fact that at the time of the issuance of the NOV, they weren't doing those things. And it's an admission that they weren't doing those things because they're thinking about changing them going forward. So they couldn't have been doing them then if they're going to change them, right? So.
But how does that answer the question? I mean, I don't want to spend a lot of time. I don't want to take up the amount of time that you would have taken up with this line of questioning, with my question myself. I really want to advance the hearing, and I guess I'm going to say, in my view, unless somebody wishes to correct me, a sloppy NOV, if that's where this is going, is a legal argument for CHT to make that, you know, this is unclear, the charges should be dismissed for failure to state a claim, so to speak. That's in legal parlance. If that's then make that legal argument on your papers. But I don't see how the sloppiness of the NOV bears on the substantive question.
It doesn't.
Thank you. Ms. Tyler?
So in our view, and this is a legal argument that
you have about 45 seconds.
Okay, we've stated in our brief that the bylaws are unclear, that none of the things the town is alleging as reasons why Harbor Place isn't a motel, none of that's in the bylaws, none of that's stated in the bylaws. The reason that I've asked the questions that you're referring to is I think it's relevant as a factual matter that the town's position, they're making it up as they go along. The town's position has evolved along the way. So back when Ms. Barrett-Jaretowski was in charge, it was that they served homeless people and they didn't provide transient lodging. And now, some ways way
goes-
down the road, there are
Ms.
other
Tyler,
reasons.
That goes to sloppiness, and I'll let you make all the legal argument you want to make about that. But what I'd rather hear is evidence that has to do with the substantive violation. I think everyone's kind of figured out what the factual basis is. It may have been sloppy going forward, but I don't think we're going to be in a position to make a determination on the facts based on the sloppiness of the NOV. So I'd like to move it along. So having said that, I think that might clear you up, Ms. Safar, to move along with your cross, unless any of my colleagues feel differently.
There's no exception to that on my part.
In other words, we don't need to hear more about the divergence between what's in the NOV and what Mr. Monti was told in meetings. In fact, frankly, I think all those meetings, honestly, are 408 meetings. And they're negotiations that shouldn't be coming into evidence, just saying. So I want to move it along. I want to hear more about what they're doing that makes them not a motel.
I understand. I am trying to preserve for the record in the event that the argument of waiver, which I think has been raised, that the town at some point waived its ability to enforce, that there's sufficient evidence to counter or to question the credibility of some of Mr. Monti's statements with respect to the concept of waiver. And so that's why I was kind of going down this line. So, and I wanted, because it's an on the record proceeding, I just wanted to make sure that there was sufficient evidence in the record to show that some of these issues were not in fact waived by the town. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I didn't see it as a waiver issue. I saw it more as a failure to state a claim type of issue.
Mr. Monti, not to belabor this, but I just want to make sure, is CHT making a claim for discrimination?
This is a zoning proceeding. We feel strongly that the people at Harbor Place are treated differently because of their income, potentially their disability. But that's not, but we still believe we're operating a motel to the public.
And at your deposition, I asked you the question of whether you could articulate any statement made by any town employee.
Yeah, objection. I mean, the issue of discrimination isn't before the board in this proceeding, and there's no reason to pursue this line of inquiry.
Yeah, sustained.
Okay. Well, if, for the record, then I could just put on the record that CHT has made the claim that they may, if this matter does get appealed, that discrimination is an issue that they may be raising in the future.
But they would be raising that in a different form, would they not?
I don't know, maybe not. Okay, so Mr. Monti, the former town manager, Mr. Boney, he was also a member of your board?
Yes.
Okay.
Of CHT's board, yes.
CHT's board.
Yeah.
And at the time that you were consulting with Mr. Boney about the use to which CHT was putting the property, he was at that same time a member of CHT's board?
Yes.
Okay. And at any time while Mr. Boney was acting in his capacity as town manager, did he at any time recuse himself because of that connection with CHT?
I don't recall.
You don't recall that he did, or you
I don't recall his recusal one way or the other relative to his acting as town manager and his membership in the board, whether he voted or not.
Well, do you ever recall any proceeding where he said, I abstain from, discussing this with you or participating from you in my capacity as town manager?
I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about as a CHT board member, which I don't understand the relevance of, but as a town manager, he called us up and asked to meet with him and the chief of police about the motel.
Okay. And he did that at the same time that he was on the CHT board?
That's right.
Okay. What was his position on the CHT board?
He was the president of the CHT board.
He was the town manager and the president of the CHT board.
Yes. And let me just state for the record, since it's an issue, we actually have many town administrators on our board. We make that's a part of our bylaws. At least 1/3 of our members of our board are members of the town, our town members. And actually Joe Colangelo was also a member of our board as well.
At the time that
It's not unusual to have members of town managers or municipal government members on our board. As a matter of fact, it's part of our bylaws.
Sure, but at the time that Mr. Colangelo issued this notice of violation, he was not on the board of CHT.
He was not. During the proceedings when we were voting on it, he was.
And during your conversations with the police chief, well, did you, strike that, did you at any point in time ask Mr. Pierce or anyone else at the town for a written determination of compliance with zoning when CHT began this project?
No.
Subsequent to beginning the project, did you ever ask for a determination in writing from anyone at the town with regards to?
Not in writing. There was a discussion, I believe, and I think you asked Amy this question. She met with Mr. Pierce and went through the zoning at that point.
I think Ms. Dimitriwicz said they never did discuss that.
I thought they did. I thought they did, but I might be wrong about that. I thought they did.
Objection. Ms. Dimitriwicz has already testified, and she was to what happened.
Yep, we know that.
Mm-hmm.
And CHT, despite, I want to ask you, can you look at the NOV, which was
Exhibit D, I believe, to Mr. Monti's testimony. Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at Exhibit C. This is the request for compliance, letter dated September 24th, 2015.
Yes.
Okay. In that letter, in the last paragraph, first sentence, this letter asks CHT to come into compliance either through applying for a permit, that was, or terminating the use. Is this, applying for a permit was one way that CHT could comply with the zoning bylaws?
It was suggested that if we wanted to comply with what was a motel as a similar use, that we could submit an application for that.
Okay. What is your understanding of the term general public?
Well, pretty much anybody.
Objection. I don't think Mr. Monti's personal opinion of what the term means is relevant.
Sustained.
Okay, and at the time that the NOV was issued, isn't it true that there is not a single off-the-street customer or anyone who is not an individual who was referred through any of the agencies?
That's correct.
That is correct.
Can I just counsel you, Mr. Monti, even though in normal parlance, it would not be rude to do what you just
Okay,
did,
sorry.
the court reporter needs a clear record, so
Sorry.
you have to wait until Ms. Safar's done.
Sorry.
It's hard being Italian, I know.
I'm just trying to hurry. I'm watching the clock.
So for the clarity of the transcript, I'll repeat my question,
Thank you.
which is at the time of the issuance of the NOV, isn't it correct that not a single off-the-street customer or anyone, or any individual acting outside of the agreements that CHT had with any of its partnering agencies presented through this proceeding today, rented a room at Harbor Place.
That is correct. We were at full occupancy right up until about 6 months ago.
And at the time of the issuance of the NOV, a vacancy sign, or prior to, at that time or prior to, a vacancy sign had never been posted outside of.
I think, and I believe that a vacancy sign was put up when we reached a certain threshold in April of May of 2015.
Do you know how many times that sign?
I don't know.
I don't have anything further.
Do any members of the board have questions of Mr. Monti?
I do, Mr. Chairman. Hi.
Hey.
So when we're talking about the prices that you guys set for your rooms, can you talk about, did you provide any input in setting these prices?
You know, I looked at the various sites and for prices, and when that number was suggested, it seemed to be right in the middle and seemed to be accurate, so that's what I did.
Okay. When you guys were looking at rates of neighboring hotels, you were looking at things like the Ho-Hum, not the Sheraton?
I didn't look at, really look at those. Those were done by other folks, and like I said, when I'm familiar with it, I sort of went and looked really quickly and said, this seems to be a good number. And was there any consideration given to given comparatively to the rate that you were charging for people who had the preset agreements, like what you were charging the DCF? I'm sorry, you're asking, did we review and look at those numbers to make those different or change those?
So when you're deciding the number of approximately 140,
yeah,
was the fact that it was approximately 30 for DCF, did that have any bearing on?
You know, we at the very beginning established a business plan that set a dollar amount for every room, and then had an expectation that we were going to have some vacancies, and began to take a look and understand what those vacancies would be in terms of pricing for that. We actually didn't get to the past the point of pricing those rooms in a real good market way. Frankly, because as soon as we opened up, we were full almost all the time, full to capacity. And the state was actually placing people in other motels all over the county, and actually had placed people in this motel before we bought it. So we really found ourselves with sort of not getting into, basically establishing a business plan that was working with the agreements we had, and didn't really need to sort of do a wider range of sort of market, sort of research or attempt to try to get more people, different people.
So
to come.
no.
So the answer is no.
Okay.
Sorry.
And then talking about recently, when we heard the testimony from Ms. Bozick saying that you had people, when you did have vacancies, coming off the street, inquiring for a room, and leaving and not getting room because of your high price point. Was there any discussions about lowering at that point?
The issue was the way people book planes. If you book them early, you're cheaper, and as you get closer, it's more expensive. We found ourselves being fully occupied so often that we really didn't need to take into consideration that price point. We just didn't need to go there. Now that we're going to have a reduction in terms of our agreement, and because we've had vacancies for the last 6 months, or occupancy has been low over the last 6 months, we're going to be looking at that price point a little more closely and doing some more work to sort of generate the income we need to operate as a motel.
Okay. And moving on now, during your testimony, you talked about working out with the town, paying for police services.
Yes.
To your knowledge, are any other hotels in the area or motels paying the town for police services?
I have no idea. I expect not, but I don't know that.
And in your mind, is that something that comes with the territory of owning a motel?
You know, it was a specific request that the town made, and we said, okay.
And at that point, there was no inquiry to whether or not that would, the fact that you're asked to make this separate thing that the majority of people in your position don't have to do, that has no bearing on whether or not you're considered a hotel in the eyes of the town?
Well, you know, the town didn't say, if you pay us for police services, therefore then you're not a motel. That was not a quid pro quo around that. That was not stated. It was simply that the town saying, you know, you're having an impact. We'd like to continue to support you, and if the number goes over a certain dollar amount, would you be willing to pay for police services? And I said, you know, it's highly unusual. I've been in municipal government for about 20 years at some point in my life. People usually don't do that, but in this context, in this consideration, we will do that.
Okay, so the fact that it was unusual did register to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And okay, so moving on then to talking about, to your knowledge, do you know how many rooms of yours are pre-booked by DCF, Lund, all the other services that you work with?
Only 30, and that number's going to 20.
Okay, and that's total, including all the services.
In terms of a guaranteed contract, we have agreements with others who will come there, but in terms of this room is available to you no matter what. Yes, that's right.
And that's out of 60?
30 out of 60 at the NOV, 20 pretty soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the rest of my question. Thank you.
Anybody else down there, way down there? Nobody?
Yeah, I had a question. I'm just curious if CHT ever, when you were first starting out, ever considered kind of a central booking arrangement that would be kind of open to the public, open to state agencies, you know, something online that would kind of make it equally available to all people.
Again, we thought we were going to need to do that. We thought we were going to be fully occupied up until about March or April, and then we were going to need to sort of come up with a plan, and we were going to spend the winter coming up with a plan to put that out to a wider members of the public come April. But we were just booked through April. We were pretty surprised. And we were booked again, like I said, pretty high occupancy, right up until I think it's more like April or May of this year. You know, where it began to sort of trail off, and we began to say, hey, something's going on here. Maybe there's less homelessness in some way. Maybe some people are not needing to come to us in other ways, and so you know we were sort of saying, well, we got to expand the public who's using this, and then we began to look at that. But we really at the very beginning, I could tell you, I could show you spreadsheets that showed how many rooms would be rented by agreement, how many rooms we expected other people might rent, and we said, okay, well, the winter might be this, and then it's going to fall off. We better talk to the Chamber of Commerce about the car show. I mean, and actually, you know, began to sort of think about who we might have conversations with about how we fill the motel.
Okay.
With regard to outside services, how is CHT is CHT or the management on site involved in the dispatching or organization or of those outside services? Do they get involved with your tenants or occupants and the outside agencies?
So I'm not the best person to answer this question.
Yeah.
What I will say is that none of the site staff or you know, the desk people, maintenance people, or housekeeping provides those services. We have a social worker on staff who may have conversations with other members of all those different organizations that we might work with, and on occasion somebody who might be a guest at Harbor Place needs to go someplace else. She's engaged in that conversation, but that's in that context. not in terms of she goes there every day and provides services to people.
She's not an on-site person.
She's not an on-site social worker. She's a social worker to all the properties, and we have some other folks who work with senior housing that we have, but she's not a social worker there.
Thank you.
Just a couple of questions. Why is it that DCF is cutting back its contract from 30 to 20? Are those the folks that are no longer coming?
The number, the demand that they have is simply less.
Okay. And I assume you have a license from the state of Vermont to operate
do.
as a motel?
We do.
Do you know, did you apply for that license? Or
No, Amy did.
do you know what was involved in putting?
It wasn't much.
Okay.
We were required, I think we required to have a cup and some soap, and a few other things.
And in fact, you
But,
do provide those things?
We do, and and we use reservation services as a software to keep track of everybody, and we have housekeeping who is there on call to do different things, and we have a resident manager, who's on site like other motels might have. So we do sort of the other things that a typical smaller motel might do. We don't have a valet and bus, a range of other services that a higher-end hotel will have.
How would you distinguish what you're offering to customers from a short-term residential service?
So we don't actually provide much in a range of short-term residential services. We have agreements with Spectrum, who run shelters, and this is not a shelter. A shelter is a place where people come in for free. They're not charged. They don't have an individual room typically. There's usually bunk beds of different kinds. We're engaged in the operation of a warming shelter. We provide a building for that, and we're providing some logistic services for that. But really, there's a whole range of people providing direct services, caseworker services to those individuals. Harbor Place is not a shelter. It's not transitional housing. People can't come to us and say they want to be there for a month or 2 months or 3 months or a year, and there's a plan to move them on to permanent housing. It's not multifamily residential. It's not single-family residential. So it doesn't really fit any of those other models for housing that we have.
Notwithstanding the fact that the contracts all talk about temporary housing.
I think that's a form that all those folks think about. They don't think about anything else. When they're looking at an individual who's a member of the public who seems at this point is homeless, they think, well, what motel could they put them up in? And they chose us because of a wide range of sensitivities that we might have that might be different than the Days Inn or the Sheridan or the Anchorage. And that's why we went into business. We went into business to be that motel that has that special intention in terms of those members of the public. And only in the fact that at this point that we've been so busy that we didn't really need to go to other members of the public, and now we have to because of sort of the reduction in the utilization.
Do you operate any other motels in the state of Vermont or in Chittenden County?
No, we don't. We've been consulting with other folks who want to.
That's all I have.
We're in the business of buying motels for other uses. So.
Ms. Tyler, anything else?
No, nothing for me.
Ms. Safar?
Just a point of clarification.
Speak up.
Just a point of clarification. Your services with regard to cleaning services, those only happen once a week, though, correct?
No.
I think that was in some of the documents.
They happen on turnover. If somebody is leaving a room, then somebody will come into a room and clean it, or once a week.
Okay. They don't happen daily. You don't have daily housekeeping.
We don't provide automatic daily housekeeping.
Okay. And I think also I saw somewhere on your list of rules that the tenants or the occupants need to take out their own trash. Is that correct?
The guests are asked to take out their own trash.
Are you?
I'm not even aware of that, but if you say so. I really am, I just haven't looked at those rules in a bit.
Okay, are you aware of any other hotel that requires the guests to take out their own trash?
You know, I've stayed at such a wide variety of motels where somebody will come in and turn down the sheets. Some people will bring me chocolate. And other times I have to sort of run out of the room because there are bed bugs on the room. And I've stayed at all those different motels. So are you asking me, do all motels take out their own trash? Most of them do that I've experienced, yes.
Take out the trash of their...
Most of them do.
Yeah. And that's it, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. I need some clarification from you, Kate, on a notice of violation. I think, strike it. Does anyone else in the audience have any evidence to give or examination of any other witnesses? Great. Now, my thought is, do we have a deadline for issuing a decision like we normally do when we're doing, you know, an application for subdivision? Yes, so, yeah.
45 days?
Same, okay. So what I want are legal memos if you want to submit them. But because it limits our time, I can't give you that much. I can't give you the ordinary 30 days. Because we have to issue a decision within 45 days.
We had talked about that this afternoon, and I forgot to write down the dates that we had agreed to.
Second, we talked about the second, if we're able to get, if the reporter believes that she can get us a transcript within a week.
She can get it sooner than that, if I know Chris. So, my phone's dead, so I don't have a calendar in front of me.
So, my colleague here has asked whether it's possible not to close the hearing until the briefs are filed, so that your 45-day deadline doesn't start running until you don't?
No, because you have to continue it to a date certain.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So if you continue the hearing and leave the evidence open, it has to be to a date certain.
Uh-huh.
So then you have to really come back and close the evidence.
Could you leave it open
Yeah.
It would be safer, I guess, if to leave it open because there's the potential that something that's filed, that there's a claim that something that's filed may be new information, new factual information. So it's just
All right.
safer to
Great,
just leave it
excellent. All right, so that's a great way to proceed. So we'll leave the hearing open, but I have to reschedule to a date, don't I? Yes.
Date certain, but we can just
If they're ready to,
close
and
it.
perhaps include a deadline for a few days before the submission of.
So our next meeting's on the 7th. So why don't we make 2 weeks? Get 31st? Need to do it to you, but that gives us a week to look at it, and then if we need to have anything additional or there's additional questions.
Yeah, that's the week before Labor Day, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the Wednesday before Labor Day. Does that work?
Have the briefs to you by that.
Yeah, and that way we can look at it for,
I think that would work, if we
week.
could get the transcript. That would be great,
Does anybody
Yeah.
have any?
When do you think, my only concern is that I have a medical procedure that's coming up at the beginning of that week, so I'm kind of out for being able to do work on maybe Monday and Tuesday. So if I don't get the transcript until Wednesday or Thursday, it means I have one day to kind of update my memo, which is not a lot.
Yes.
I can get this to you by the weekend, no problem.
Oh, you're the best.
When we spoke earlier, we had talked about Friday of that week. We had talked about the 2nd as a possible day, if, that would give you.
The 2nd was enough for me.
That would give you a little more time.
Yeah.
It's acceptable to the board.
Puts us in a position, though, of having to spend our Labor Day weekend reading it and then go right into.
Okay. We'll get it
Here's,
done.
tell you what,
Figure it
if Ms. Farr, if you are having an issue, just let Kate know and Kate can contact me and we'll make it work.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which leads me, of course, to the other obvious question, which is, has there been any discussion between the parties about resolution at all?
We have, we met.
Oh, great.
Last week, I believe, but unfortunately, we weren't able to make much progress.
Okay.
So, but we did try.
Okay, thank you. I think then we can adjourn for the time being, which is, well, that's what I thought an adjournment was, and I thought we all decided that we're going to continue, so I'll make a motion to continue this hearing and leave it open and continue it to September 7th. Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None? Okay, so we're adjourned until then. Thank you very much. So, I remember to add this stuff to the calendar.
I know. We have 15 minutes to go.
One other thing to go over. What? No, just really quick. It's just, I did an administrative site plan approval, and it's in your packets, and it's just, if you have a problem with it, you gotta tell me.
Yeah.
But if it's all good, I actually don't need a motion or anything, it's just, you can appeal it if you want to.
This is the one for,
Shelburne, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't understand what it is they're doing.
They're reconstructing a building that's already existing, it's a full storage building, they're moving it over 20 feet and constructing it in a slightly different dimension, but same square footage.
I don't have a problem with it.
for me.
Doesn't look like anybody down there does either. Okay. I'm gonna move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Not heavy, it's
Aye.
Yes.